Hello, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
No party this week, John?
No, it all went very well. We had lots of delicious curries and special rice.
Oh, lovely.
Everybody left happy at the end. Yeah. Well, I think they did, Marianne, didn't they?
Yes, we did.
Oh, Matt, just quickly, one of our fellow aspirant sea leaders hasn't been able to book in. Is this being recorded?
I think Charlotte's going to record it, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got a recording on at the moment. So I'll pass it on to my colleague Matthew, who'll work his usual magic and make that recording available to be emailed out.
Thank you very much.
And I just also want to say at the top, because we're in Google Meet and not Zoom, so I don't know if everyone's familiar with this, your chat box is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It's the little message icon there. So you will be able to use that as normal, but that is where that is found.
Very good. Thank you.
Fab, thanks for coming along. I think we've got our regular folks this week. So this is the final session of this series, and we're talking about the assessment day itself tonight. I guess we are. This will be done really in a style where it's just some top tips from me, going through chronologically, preparing for the assessment, like the immediate run-up, the day itself, how it all works, and then the feedback stage as well. So after you've finished, because the assessment very much isn't the end; it's often the beginning. Because once you achieve the award, which hopefully you will, that's where you start learning on the job. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. So yeah, Charlotte says we're on Google Meet. So that does mean that when I share, I can't see everybody. So I might just ask if you're still there, rather than it's just to check it's not me talking on my own. But yeah, thanks for coming along to the session this evening. I guess it'd be great just to kick off, if we're all right to just use the chat box, if you're right to locate that, and just let us know what award you're working towards. And if that's working towards it as in, I might do this one in the future, I'm not sure yet, or I've got my assessment tomorrow. Anywhere between that would be great to know. Just that'll allow me to put some context on the tips that I'm going to give. Seems like we've got a lot of folks who are sea kayakers, which is fantastic. Is anyone a non-salty person? Subcoastal, still salty but stood up. Great, Fiona. Thanks. Great. Sounds like we've got everybody working on the sea. Meg's a curious paddler. That's good. And I don't know if it's Sharon or Hannah. I'm not sure which way around it is, but working towards Sea Coach. Great. So it sounds like we're all sea paddlers really, or coastal sub paddlers, which is great. So I'll sort of allude to that as we go through with the assessment day and refer to those. Hopefully we're seeing this at the moment. Seeing the slides?
Yeah.
Great. Still seeing them?
Yeah.
So I guess just to work through pre-course, I guess just a reminder of all the steps that we're going to need to have in place. Some folks, I think Fiona said she's registered already. So just double checking that you have registered for the award that you're intending to do, and good to do that in good time. So whenever you're thinking about doing it, good to sort your registration out. The registration does have an expiry, I think, of 3 years. But if for some reason you don't manage to finish it within that time, it's very simple just to extend it by just contacting your home nation. There is a cost associated to that. And the reason for that is the admin time that's associated with checking your prerequisites. So the prerequisites for the Sea Kayak Leader, for example, are to make sure you've got your safety training in place, which at the moment is your coastal navigation tidal planning. Next month it'll be the modules, which are very similar in terms of the content of coastal navigation, tidal planning. But so one of each of those needs to be in place. If you've got an RYA equivalent as well, that can often be used if you've got day skipper theory, for example. So that'll be one thing, and that's the same for subcoastal. You also need a first aid certificate that's in date, it's a 2-day first aid certificate, and some element of safeguarding training. So once all of those things are in place, you can fill in a registration form on JustGo on the portal, pay a fee, and then you'll get emailed back a registration certificate. And that registration certificate is the only thing that you need to take along to the assessment or send to the assessor beforehand. So that's the only thing you need to actually take along. You don't need to take along your certificates and whatnot. The assessor will likely send out some joining instructions. We talked about that last week. And there'll be a lot of detail in there about potentially where you're going to meet and all that sort of stuff, but also a bit about the feedback. Links to the syllabus and the assessment criteria will be in there. And that'll be quite lengthy, so it's worth giving that a good read. We talked a bit about logbooks last week. A logbook isn't mandatory for these awards, but certainly recommended. And if you wanted to submit some sort of logbook, an assessor might ask you some questions about your experience just to get if they don't know you, for example. So a logbook is a good idea, because when you get the award, it's good to keep a record of the leading that you're doing and the personal paddling that you're doing. I should say, if there's any questions whilst we're going along, feel free to unmute and interrupt me. And if Charlotte, if you're right to keep an eye on the chat box and just let me know if there's any questions coming in there. There might be some pre-course tasks. Occasionally what we might do, and Subcoastal and Sea Kayak Leader are a good example of this, we might set a tidal planning task. Potentially we might have to go to a venue where, for one reason or another, the tidal planning's not that critical. So there might be a hypothetical tidal planning task that gets sent to you beforehand. That wouldn't be standard, that wouldn't be every assessment, but occasionally I have done that. For example, I've done assessments on the east coast of Scotland, Stonehaven, Montrose, places like that. Well, there's not really that much movement of tide. There's wind as well. So I've set a tidal planning task just to assess that element of knowledge, knowing that we're probably going to be a venue where there's not much tidal flow. So that might be a pre-course task that you have to fill in. That's an example. We talked about a bit mock students last week, about the choice of whether you go with people that you know or people that you don't know. But to be honest, often it's finding anybody, to be honest. So sounding out mock students in good time and making sure they're committed is often part of a challenge. And of course, they need to be just at the right standard. So Sea Kayak Leader, for example, we're really looking for those Sea Kayak Award paddlers, people that have done some sheltered coastal journeys in up to force 3 and maybe a little bit of wind. So that the top end of the remit is going to be a challenge for them. That's going to be expanding their comfort zone. So they genuinely do need to be led. If they're too good, it actually makes your life a lot harder. And obviously, if they're a complete beginner, then that will make your life difficult as well. So they do need to be that Goldilocks paddler who's just at the right standard. So they do need to be led and challenged in the environment. And the reason for that is that will make your life easier rather than making life more difficult. In a slight misnomer where we recruit mock students because they're really good at towing or they're really good at rescues, that wouldn't be something to advise. So don't be tempted to go with those types of people because you're sort of honing in on the incident management side of things. Excuse me. Try and find people who are going to need to be challenged and supported in the environment, because that will allow you to showcase your leadership behaviours much better. Subcoastal and Sea Kayak Leader are a great example of awards where we're really going to have to keep an eye on the weather in the run-up to the day. And tragically, we do sometimes have to postpone or cancel if we can't get the forecasted conditions in the bank. For both those awards, we're going to need a force 4 average wind at some point in the day that we can utilise, and that needs to be forecasted, an average wind rather than gusting, which can materialise sometimes but can be a bit fickle at other times. So let's say, for example, we've got a force 2 gusting 4. that wouldn't be confidence enough that we're going to get the assessment conditions necessarily, depending on the wind direction a wee bit. So monitoring those conditions as we go through the week in the run up to the day is going to be really important. So that in mind, everybody needs to be quite flexible. And this can be a challenge if, say booked accommodation. That can be quite tricky. So shying away from booking accommodation if you can manage it, and making sure that you've got enough flexibility that you can shift location if you need to, and potentially, postpone last minute might happen. So that can be the big challenge really when we're running up to pre-course. It's making sure we've got enough wind in the forecast for the assessment to run, and being flexible with that. As I said, I've had, unfortunately, a candidate where we had to cancel 3 or 4 times because we just haven't got the conditions materializing when we needed it. In the run up to the course, whether you've arranged the mock students yourself or whether the assessors arrange them, there'll be an opportunity to start getting to know them in some sort of way. And I tend to do that via either a WhatsApp group or a messenger group or an email chain. And that's an opportunity for them to submit their experience and also their aspirations for the day, and also a chance for you to introduce yourself and ask them any questions you might want. And that's a chance for you to really start taking ownership over the day before it happens. You can set the theme of the day, the ethos of the day, and also get to know them, so you're not arriving cold, having never met them. You've got a sense of what they're looking for, and that will allow you to start planning, and also allow you to potentially choose the venue based on what their aspirations are. And we also need to decide the assessment ratios. As I said, you can be assessed with somebody else. There can be 2 candidates to 1 assessor. But as I said, my recommendation is that you do that with somebody that you know. It can be quite tricky to do an assessment with somebody you've not met before, because you might have very different leadership styles. You might be different people, and that might unnerve you, just like in a driving test. It's other drivers that often cause you problems rather than your own driving. I'll pause there for questions. How do I stop this? Aha, stop. So anything about pre-course, jumping you want to ask?
So as a matter of interest, why is a more proficient paddler bad to lead?
It's bad to lead because we really want to be getting off the water with them saying, "Oh, I wouldn't have done this trip if you hadn't been here." That's a really good sign that they're just to the right standard. If they're too comfortable in the environment, actually, they don't need much support. So you don't really need to display strategies such as going in a formation, or ensuring you've got an upwind or downwind marker, or ensuring that you've got a strategy to keep everybody together, because they'll be able to do that quite easily. So you won't be able to display those communication, line of sight, avoidance, positioning strategies as easily, because they probably won't need it. And finding challenge is a lot easier with somebody who there's challenge all around about them. If, for example, the only time they're really going to be challenged is one rock hop that's quite spicy, the rest of the day they're not really challenged. Again, it's going to be really difficult for you to display your leadership behaviours where you're finding challenge for them.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
a question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great question.
Matt, last week you mentioned you raised the question: do you have to be able to roll on both sides? Is it an urban myth, or do you have to be able to roll on both sides?
No, you don't have to be able to roll on both sides. The role for Sea Kite Leader is no setup. So you need to go over without the paddle in that setup position. You can capsize in an attack position for sure, but you can't, oh, right, hang on a minute, just let me get myself sorted. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be more of a dynamic situation.
Yep.
And it needs to be an up, down on one side, up on the other, rather than a half roll, which would be over to one side and back up on the same side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But no, you don't have to be able to. It's helpful for sure. There's going to be
Yeah.
situations in the wind where rolling both sides can be really useful, but it's not an assessed task.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great.
One other thing, I keep a very informal logbook. Is that a problem? And is there some sort of format I might want to be following in the future?
No, there's no format. I've known lots of different styles of logbook. You know, my Google Calendar is my logbook,
Mhm.
and I just add notes to it. My Instagram's my logbook. But other people prefer to do, as I said, I think last week I was presenting an assessment with about 8 leather-bound books by one chap, and just slammed them on the table in front of me and said, "There's my logbooks." So some people do that. Some people do an Excel spreadsheet.
I'm just more concerned about possibly information not being captured.
Yeah, it's what you put down. So the information that's needed would be sort of the maximum or top end conditions that you went out in. So what sort of wind speeds, swell height, tidal flow did you experience on the journey? Distance or time that you were out for, that you did the journey on. Who you were with, how many were in the group, where you went, obviously. And maybe a short paragraph about learning that you captured from the day, or we saw a seagull or something like that. You know, something interesting about it would be a great addition to that. And also your role in the group. So are you just paddling with mates? Is it a peer paddle? Was it a solo paddle? Because totally fine to go out and do that. Or were you leading the group? Or were you assisting? Or did you have an assistant? All of those things would be good to put down as well.
Great, thanks.
One of the things I asked in the chat box is, have you got a particular logbook that you recommend? I was looking at logbooks last night. Quite a few of them don't show you the page inside, or the page inside look quite busy.
There are official logbooks, but I would make one yourself.
Just use a hardback cover and...
Yeah, just have one that's unique to you.
Okay, yeah.
As long as it's got that detail in that we've just discussed,
Yeah.
in some shape or form, that would be fine. But once again, there's no requirement to have a logbook for assessment. I just think it's a good idea if you are going to be a leader, and it's good. It's a good thing to chat through people with. Great questions. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Oops.
Hi Neil. Hello.
Hi.
Didn't see you there.
sorry, I'm late. I was actually out on the 4th experimenting today, and then I was chatting to Tim and completely lost track of time. So apologies for being late. Fresh from the water and still shivering. Can I just ask you about the unconscious paddler and the paddler that is somewhat more voluminous than I am? Because I was trying it today, as I have tried many times, and I can get them halfway. So, you know, I'll save their life, in that their airway will be intermittently dipped in and out the water, but it'll be out the water for a bit of the time. But that last bit, so I can get them on their side, fair enough, because I can do the push pull and get the boat to halfway. But then getting my short arms along their long body to get enough of a leverage to then do the final bit is quite tricky. And I know I've heard people say that you almost need your boat to be a little bit distant, so there's somewhere for the boat to go as you tip it over. Well, my arms ain't long enough to do that. And I've got various options. One is, and in the real world, I would get a mate to come in and help me super quick. So I'll get their head out the water, but then I need more than one person to help get them properly upright. The other thought is that if all else fails, I rip off my spray deck, put my Superman pants on and jump in the water and pull them up as I go under. But then that leaves the instructor in the water with a critically ill casualty. So what's the answer?
The answer, which is an awkward answer, is what's detailed in the criteria, and I've just got it here. It says rescue an unconscious paddler. Leaders are required to rescue and stabilize an unconscious paddler and have an open airway. The leader is required to explain, that's quite a key word, not demonstrate, explain appropriate further actions after initial stabilization. So what we're looking for as a minimum is stabilize means ensure the paddler has an open airway. That could be they're still in the boat, that could be they're in the water. But that's the key thing that we're looking for. And then call for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
So calling for help utilizing all the technology that you got available. Obviously, we're not going to set the PLB off for real if it's a scenario, but we'd demonstrate and talk about that. We'd be on the VHF making a mayday and doing that appropriately. We'd be getting the phone out, and we'd also be managing the group.
Mm-hmm.
So you said, oh, in the real world I would get some help. Well, the assessment's still the real world. So this will be a team effort.
Right.
If I had an
I guess
unconscious paddler in my group, I wouldn't be doing everything myself.
Yeah.
I'd be
I
getting
guess
as
that
many
was my
people as possible
question.
helping me.
So
Sorry,
you
can
can pull everyone in.
Absolutely.
Great. That's fine.
Yeah. We should not be trying to do everything ourselves, because we should always go back to that first aid principle of self-team swimmer equipment, and we should also be selfish. So a critical part of the unconscious paddler rescue is there shouldn't be any manual handling risks associated with that. So what we don't want to see is lifting people onto decks and twisting your back and hurting your back, or lifting people up beaches, because that's not good manual handling. That's actually going to injure people, and that wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do. What we might do on the assessment is we might say, right, just stop a moment. The unconscious person will magically come back to life for a brief second, get up the beach a bit, and then drop down again. And then you go into your first aid situation from there. So it might be water-based or it might be beach-based.
Cool.
If it's water-based, it's the detail. All we're looking for is that you stabilize the situation, they have an open airway, and then you explain that how you're going to call for help. And then we're into things like grid references, we're into things like position, we're into the equipment that you've got, your comms, making sure that's accessible, all that kind of stuff.
Great. Thank you.
It's very helpful to be able to do a hand of God rescue. So if that's something you can practice, then great. But if you've got really short arms and the person's 4 times the size of you, then there's a limit to how achievable that is on your own. Of course it is.
So the fact that one arm's longer than the other at the moment is considered manual handling problem, is it?
Oh yeah, most certainly. Yeah. Nice.
Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When it comes to getting back in the boat yourself, there's been a number of ways people have told me we can get back in. We can do the cowboy rescue, which I think is quite old-fashioned, or we can do the re-entry roll, or we can do a heel hook, get yourself in with a paddle and float. Can we do a re-entry roll using a paddle float?
Yeah.
I
You
can't
do whatever
do it,
you
right?
like.
As long as we get back in that boat.
I had somebody who had a deflated space hopper, and they inflated it with a valve with their mouth, and they hand rolled using that. They
That's what I was going to do with the yeah.
And they also used the space hopper as their spare hatch cover. So this is quite common. So there's a lot of misnomers about, oh, you have to do it this way, and that's not true. We need to, and I would always say, delve into the assessment criteria and actually see not just what the words say, but what it doesn't say. So it doesn't mention cowboy, it doesn't mention re-entry and roll, it doesn't mention any of these things. All it says, and I'm just going to not misquote it and get in trouble. An additional self-rescue (brackets not a roll) will be demonstrated by the leader in moderate environments. And it also says now, and this is a new addition, support from others is permitted to stabilize the craft but no physical assistance should be provided to get back in or on their craft during a self-rescue. What that means is now somebody can hold the boat steady for you whilst you have a go at it, but what they can't do is, drag you by the shoulder and, basically hold the boat whilst you do a heel hook. So you could do a cowboy, or, it's more PC name or whatever. It's a scrambler board's a better name for it. And they could be holding the front of the boat steadily, but they can't, touch you and essentially rescue you. Just like with the roll on both sides thing, it's still really useful for us to practice and be able to do this on our own, because that is a more robust self-rescue. But really look at the criteria and see what it says, but also what it doesn't say. And words like explain is different to the word demonstrate. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
So you come up with your solution that works for you in your boat, for you as a person, and demonstrate that. The key thing is that it works in the conditions. So we might come up with weird and wonderful stuff in the flat, but just something that needs to work in moderate water.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
So the assessor wouldn't be slightly more perturbed at seeing you ask for people to stabilize your boat while you do a back deck scramble?
They might be, but their job is to read the criteria and assess the criteria. They can be perturbed all they like. It's not their job to assess subjectively. They need to be objective based on what's black and white and what's written in that document. And I know that sounds not real world, and there's lots, if I was to write a criteria, I wouldn't write it like that. I'd probably change some stuff, but it's not the MAT award. It's British Canoeing awarding body. They've decided what the criteria is. So yeah, they might be perturbed, but they're assessing a standard, and that is their job.
Okay,
so they'd be perturbed all they like, but it says that you're allowed to do that, so you're allowed to do that.
I suppose my final thought on that is, if it was all not borderline, but that, do you know what? That'll do. Your answer's good. Thank you.
It might be, but this is about assessing what's black and white and written on the page.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So the day itself, we've talked about assessment ratios and conditions required. As much as possible, we shouldn't, it can happen, but we're trying to avoid it. We shouldn't really be pitching up and go, oh, it's flat calm, and they said there'd be wind. That can happen sometimes, but that's why we need as much confidence in the forecast as possible. So as I said, a 2 gusting 4 forecast, I wouldn't run an assessment on it. Yes, it says there might be a force 4 that might arrive, but that's not confidence enough that we're going to get the conditions, because they're a really important aspect of the assessment being robust. Feedback's really a big part of the day, and I guess in the olden days you'd not hear from the assessor and they wouldn't say anything all day, and you'd find out at the end how well you did. And that's not really a feedback style that's educationally proved to be effective. If we think back to A-levels or Scottish Highers, when people did an exam at the end of their school and they passed or failed, that was proven not to work. That's why there's coursework. That's why there's several instances where there's assessment all the way through school. And it's the same here in terms of feedback. So ideally, feedback is going to happen through the day, so you get an idea about how things are going. That might happen after you've done a task, or it might happen at lunch, But you'll certainly have lots of conversations about the assessor. And I said last week, I think the assessor can see what you do, but they can't hear what you think. So there'll be a lot of dialogue and questions happening, an opportunity for feedback as you go along. So feedback distribution is important, and it's good to have a chat with the assessor about how you'd like to receive your feedback. So how often do you want it? Some people prefer to have it all at the end. Some people prefer not to be interrupted because they're in a bit of a flow and they'd rather just chat at lunch. So you can take ownership over that and have a chat with the assessor about your feedback distribution, if that makes sense. Taking ownership over the day from the off and even before it. So I mentioned this WhatsApp group and this Messenger group. You take charge of that, and you know that's your group, your people that you're taking out. So put all the detail that you want them to know beforehand. Don't wait for the assessors to do that. And also imagine that you're guiding a day yourself. So all the bits and pieces, and take ownership over the day. There still has to be an element of collaboration, because the assessor will know a bit more detail about the tasks, the assessment tasks that we've just been talking about, where might be good to do those. So there'll still be an element of collaboration, but try and be forthcoming with plans. And then the assessor can go, yeah, that's a really great plan, but I'm just going to cut it short because I know on that headland there's a really good place where we could do X, Y, and Z. So it'll be a collaborative approach in terms of how the day will pan out, but you take ownership over it as much as possible. Leave some time for a bit of profiling. By profiling, I mean when you get on the water, particularly if you haven't met the group before, to spend some time finding out where they're at, because a picture paints 1,000 words. So some tasks to see where people's paddling are at, and plan a journey that will allow you to facilitate that. So not necessarily a journey where you're heading out straight into conditions with a group that you don't know. When I'm working with a group I don't know, I try and plan a journey where we've got a bit of shelter to start, so I can get a measure of people and see where they're at. We do need to access the top end of the remit. So for sea kayak and sup coastal, that's going to be that force 4 wind. We don't need to be in it all the time, but we do need to be able to access it for most of the day. So we need a trip that will facilitate that. Mock student suitability we've talked about already. In terms of your kit, I guess don't expect some sort of, brownies or Boy Scouts inspection where you're going to get all your kit out, and lay it out in front of your boats and talk about it. It'll be you using your kit, because it's all very well carrying it, but the assessment is about you using it. So the group shelter will probably come out. All the stuff you've got to keep people warm will probably come out and used. Your repair stuff will probably be used. So make sure that you're practiced and actually using it. So we all buy these repair patches, but have a go at using it. How do you apply it? Try and stick it to your wheelie bin or something to see if it works properly. Always that reflection happening throughout. So the assessment isn't about doing everything perfectly, because that's not real. We're always going to reflect and think, oh, I could have done that better, I could have done that differently. And if you're forthcoming with those thoughts yourself, that's like music to the assessor's ears, really. If you go up to them and go, oh, I shouldn't have, let that person go first through the rock hop, I should have led them through, or I should have put them as the downwind marker in hindsight. If you start reflecting as you go along and thinking about how you could have done things differently, that's really great skill of a leader, to be reflective. So always make sure that you try and do that. Don't just say, oh, I should have done that, and then you start agonizing over, have I failed? I might have messed this up. Just talk about it, because that will show that you're reflective about it. Always ask questions if you're not unsure what you're expected to do. You've asked questions to me tonight. Ask those same questions of the assessor, and they'll tell you their expectations about what it is in terms of criteria. Ask them in advance. So the questions you've asked to me, ask to them, because they might put a different spin on it slightly, and maybe give you talk in a different language so you understand it differently. It is quite a long day, and the mock student, I'd say, need to be prepared for quite a long day, because they're probably going to spend some time getting wet as well. Particularly if there's 2 people being assessed, that's quite a long day, quite a long physical day. And the subcoastal does include a night paddle, so that's another reason for it being quite a long day as well. And remember that the day is all about learning. It's about development. It's about feedback, regardless of the result, pass or fail. It's about an opportunity to get feedback on your leadership. So try and grab that opportunity and see it as that. And Vision Support Challenge on the right here, that's the bread and butter of what good leadership is. You're going to provide a vision by being inspiring, by your personal skills being good, by the way you present yourself, by being organized. You're also going to provide a vision for the day, but you're also going to take into account what their vision for the day is. What are they looking to get out of it? What are their motivations for being there? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? What they're looking to do, and try and get them to be as specific as possible, because that will help you. And then throughout the day, we're balancing support and challenge. I'm looking after people that need looking after, but I'm also making sure they're not bored and making sure they're sufficiently challenged so they've got a smile on their face. And we're linking between the two all the time and trying to spin those plates. And then feedback. Just talk about feedback, that growth mindset that we've chatted about. Regardless of result, make sure you get that feedback at the end and make sure you're clear about it. If it is an unfortunate result, really lots of detail about, well, what do I need to do differently? How do I need to improve? So you can get an action plan together that you understand. Take time to reflect as well. So often we get the results on the day, but it might not have sunk in yet, pass or fail. So actually maybe go away for a couple of days, get a good night's sleep, and then come back to it and go, actually, right now I'm going to sit down and unpack the day. We talked about how often you get feedback. You're welcome to have written feedback as well. So written feedback is something that you can request, and the assessor can do that for you. And it's always that learning experience. And remember, there's lots of people here to help you. So if you've got questions at any time, the assessor's there to help you, actually. Paddle Scotland's there to help you. So there's lots of avenues for support as you go through. So that's all I had planned. The rest of it's Q&A, really. And we've got hands up already, which is great.
Hey Matt, I'm guessing you are a bit of an advantage if you're familiar with the location that your day trip's in.
Yes.
And I guess there's also instances where that might not be the case if you've had to relocate for weather at the 11th hour. What's your thoughts on that? Does it make sense to try as much as you can to paddle that location first?
There's lots of advantages in doing that, being a coastline that I'm familiar with, because you know the forecast on that day. Oh, I know there's going to be a really good rock up at this tidal height, or I know that headland, I'm going to get shelter in that bay, etc., etc. But there's still advantages to leading a coastline that you don't know, because you're having to really scout ahead and having to really think about finding the conditions and trying to interpret a weather forecast and what impact that will have on the sea. Don't get me wrong, it is more stressful, but it's real. It's not possible for us to paddle everywhere. So having the ability to lead a group where you don't know it so well, then that can be good. But try and stack the deck in your favour. So my stressful days at work are with a group of people I don't know, in a place I don't know, in advanced conditions.
Yeah.
I'm having kittens all the time and I need a stiff drink by the end. So if you're going to go to a coastline you don't know, go with people that you do know, for example. That will make your life a bit easier. So think about it that way as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions? Oh, we've got a queue going. Michelle.
Hi. Yeah, my question was in relation to the expectation for, I guess, the distance paddled. Is there an expectation for how long the day will be? Like, is there a minimum amount of time we're going to be spending on the water during the assessment?
There is, and I can't remember what it is. I want to say an hour, but an hour of quality leadership in the conditions, in the top end conditions.
Okay.
There might be time, obviously there'll be time either side of that, but it's not done on distance.
Okay.
And often often when I assess, people plan the day and they go, well, we're going to do a 15-kilometer day, because that's probably what you do if you're going out with your club or with your friends. But actually, there's so much to fit in. Look at that list of rescues.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not about distance; it's about time, quality leadership.
So, but from a planning perspective, you would be expecting someone to be planning a trip.
Yeah.
And that trip wouldn't be fully realised.
Not necessarily fully. So I might say, let's say I'm assessing you tomorrow. I'll say, right, Michelle, you plan as a trip for me. You'll submit that plan and go, well, we're going to go from, I don't know, out from North Berwick, out to Bass Rock and back again. And then we might drop down the coast a little bit as well and finish somewhere else. And then we'll do a shuttle. And I'll go, well, that's a really lovely trip. And if it won't have all this stuff to pack in, then we'd probably do it. But because we've got lots of stuff that we need to do, actually, we're just going to go out to the Lethies and then maybe a bit further, then we're going to come back again. So submit a trip plan, but I guess expect the assessor that they might veto it, because they'll have a much better handle on just how time sapping doing all this stuff is.
Yeah.
So how is it decided when all the additional skills come out? So when the rescues happen, these sorts of things?
The tough thing on the sea is it might happen at any time. On the river, it's a bit easier because you can go, well, that's a really good rapid for that to happen. And you'll go, oh, well, we'll do the rescues at the end because that's where the grade 3 rapid is, for example. But on the sea, we do have to be quite opportunistic. So don't be surprised if you come around the corner and there's just this perfect place to, hit your roll off. And we know that at 2 o'clock, the wind's going to die down. So it might just happen at any time, which is a bit disconcerting.
So the assessor just decides this, and
they will, yeah. Will.
One other question, if I can, about getting the wind conditions right. So the way I see it, you're going to be more likely to be in a position where it's force 4 gusting 6. Can you run the assessment in those conditions, or do you need a forecast for a steady 4 but no more?
So it also can't be too strong either.
Yeah,
this is why it's tricky. So what we don't want to do, and when I first started assessing, I foolishly tried to assess in a force 9, which didn't work. I just hid in a corner somewhere, but that's not that realistic. So what we basically need a wind speed where we can go out, into the conditions, not limiting our trip. So if we end up with, 4 gusting 7, and 7s might materialize, and we're hiding in a bay and dipping in and out of it, then that wouldn't be a meaningful assessment either, because you're not really doing a journey in those conditions. So it is a bit of a knife edge, and I have cancelled assessments because it's too windy. So that's why it's really tricky. It is tricky to find exactly the right conditions, and knowing the coastline and knowing that, oh right, okay, it's 4 gusting 5, but I know that on that wind direction and with that swell height, it'll work really well. And knowing the venues, I think that's the key thing, really.
Thank you.
There is a tale of an assessment in Loch Islet, and it was a southeasterly, which is a really vicious wind direction on the west coast, because you get quite katabatic winds. And all the candidates, all the mock students capsized in a gust, and the assessor was the only one left upright. Well, not me. Yeah. So that's always a story that I recall. And that's an example. It was just too much wind forecast. It was too gusty.
Did they
the
pass?
direction's really nasty.
Did they pass?
I can't remember actually. I think the fact they got back to the bus, I think they were happy enough with that. Fiona, you've got a question there.
Yeah, hi. So hopefully I can explain my question well. So obviously in SUP it's quite challenging in the upper end of the conditions with the remount, with the swell and the winds. How much time do you expect? For example, I would probably look, if the forecast had before, that I would probably look to use the coastline to give us a bit of shelter on SUP, and then pop out round into the into where I would be exposed to the force 4 conditions with a bit of swell.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't look to have the assessment and the candidate or the mock clients out in that condition the entire time, because I think that could be you'd be constantly rescuing potentially. What's your view on how much time you should kind of pop out into the conditions?
I think that guideline of an hour is quite good. I think for SUP it's different. It is different because it is a lot more physical to spend time in those conditions for a big chunk of the day. So the best kind of SUP assessment is where we've got wind at a headland and we're paddling along the sheltered coast.
Yeah.
At the start of the day, we're going out to the headland, we're having a bit of a play, doing the rescues, and then we're coming back along the same way. That'd be a really good SUP assessment. Or we're doing a lot more downwind runs. So actually, we're doing shuttles, we're doing A to B trips, because paddling into a force 4, we're not going to do that for very long.
So you would be okay with a downwind type shuttle?
Oh yeah, 100%. That's a good idea. I wouldn't be okay with that. I think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah. No, it's just about being able to lead a group into headwinds. And
yeah, I mean there will be a bit of that, but it would be daft to plan a trip where we're spending lots of time paddling into a wind on a paddleboard.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a good leadership decision.
Yeah, and I'd probably, as you were saying about using the coastlines, I probably would look to use the coastline for a bit of shelter rather than having the winds coming in at the coastlines where you were getting a battering all day.
Yeah.
So probably using the offshore winds more carefully. And I take it that's okay, you're not expecting to have that massive wave front constantly battering you.
I guess similar to sea kayak as well, we've got a landing required where it's 3 foot.
Yeah.
So we do need to find somewhere where we can do that. And chances are an offshore wind, unless there is swell, probably won't facilitate that. So I guess that's the only. It could happen, but we do need to be mindful that we'll need to find somewhere where there's, it's a lee shore, and there's going to be weather hitting it.
Yeah, so it's looking for that little bay just round the headland. You can do that. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
Sharon, I think you were next.
Yeah. Just a quick question. I know we talked about roles earlier on. Say say I fall in, I capsize while I'm doing my assessment, and I just roll to come back up. Would I have to prove I can roll again further on down the assessment, or would the assessor take that as she can roll?
I would take that you can roll, and it'd be great because you've done it in anger.
Right. Okay.
That happened to me the last one I did. A big set came through, and both candidates rolled back up again.
Yeah. Well, that's my thing. Is if I capsize, I'm doing the assessment. Also, if I can get back up, I'm okay.
Yeah. It does talk about a consistent roll. So you might be asked to do it again, but we want mainly for that consistent element. But if you did that, then that'd be great. That'd be really good. Sorry, that wasn't a very clear answer.
No, it's just I didn't know whether I'd have to do it again or that I'd accept that as a role. I mean, you're out there all day, and the chances are you're in a force 4. You could be battling against the waves or the weather and whatever else, and you do come a cropper earlier on, and you think, right, okay, I don't want to get wet again because it's cold, it's winter, or it's autumn, or it's spring, and you go, can you roll again? You think, oh, really?
I think the word it's used is leaders will demonstrate the ability to reliably roll in moderate environments. So reliably to me means if a big set came through and you rolled up, that's pretty reliable.
Right. Thank you.
Neil.
A question about day length and day start, because some places like I mean, I'm doing one with you where I'll need to be getting up to the Oban area. So what start times are normally applied, and do I need to be there the night before, or can you get there on the day, and also how long are days in terms of finishing?
It's a pretty long day, and I think for us we'll probably meet at a cafe That's my kind of start really.
Mhm.
Probably about 8:30.
Right.
And it might depend on the weather. So if we know
Yeah,
that it's going
absolutely,
to get calmer in the afternoon, we might meet at 8 and be finishing a bit earlier. And yeah, be prepared to be finishing 5ish. So yeah, a reasonably long day with the faff that's involved and the journey and things like that.
Great. Thanks.
Julie.
Yeah, would do you have, as the person being assessed, do you have full autonomy over the location, or will the assessor input to that, or even tell you where it should be?
It'll be a collaborative decision. You should certainly be forthcoming with, I think we should go here, because I know the group. I'm going to find conditions there that will challenge them, and that's where we're going to access the conditions, and it'll be a really good trip, etc., etc. The assessor might turn around and go, just when I was talking to Michelle earlier, okay, really nice trip, but we're just going to shorten it slightly, or actually, yes, but I know that actually further up the coast, I think will be better, so we should go there. So be prepared for a veto, but more often than not, I'm just giving a thumbs up to the plans that people come up with, to be honest.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where it's right, meet at this car park because we're going here. I've decided we're going here, because that's not leadership. A leader needs to be able to decide. That's our first decision. Where are we going?
Mm-hmm.
So we do need to come up with a plan of some sort that might get adapted, and it'll only get adapted because, again, we know as assessors just how much time gets eaten up with all the nuts and bolts that have to be demonstrated.
Okay.
Great. Fantastic. Well, if there's no more questions, best of luck to everybody. Hopefully some strong passes in the team, especially Neil. We're together. Yeah, we got the inside track already.
I obviously missed last week because I'd forgotten these things were on, but I'm going to watch it. But I've obviously missed a quarter of this one as well. So are there slides that I can catch up on, or how best to do that?
It's being recorded, and if you just
Right.
email hello@Paddle Scotland,
yeah,
and say, "Oh, can I get the recording for the whichever sessions?" Then Matthew, I think, isn't it, Charlotte, can get those passed on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final question, Matt.
Yeah.
Sorry, Neil, have you finished?
No, so it sounds like I need to email Charlotte tomorrow morning.
Yeah, absolutely. If you email into the hello@ inbox, then
I'll do
I'll
that.
pick that up and send that over.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the final question. So, would you say generally, because I can see getting the right caliber of student to be free and flexible, how often does it work that the assessor can gather a bunch of students?
Reasonably often. I've got a pretty extensive list of guinea pig groupies that I call upon. Neil being one of them, actually. And that can happen, but it's timing, really. Midweek's tricky. So that can be harder because when people are at work, so retired people are available, but it can be really tricky for people to get time off. So weekends tend to be a bit easier. And time of year can be different as well. But by and large, we can hunt people out. And as I said, we need 3 as a minimum. So we tend to arrange 4 in case somebody drops out on the day.
So if you've got 2 candidates, would you have 6 people, 3 per candidate?
No, we'd have 4 mock students still, and you just take turns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sharon, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah. Sorry. Right. How do I get onto your guinea pig register? Only reason being I'm asking is, I'm ready to do my assessment, and I've only done 1 guinea pig. I did that about 4 years ago, and it was just too soon for me. So I just thought just before I go and do my assessment bank, get a couple of and do a couple of guinea pigs. But I'm not sure how to go into your registrar.
If you just either phone or email Glenmore Lodge
Okay.
and say I'd like to be a mock student, and then you'll get put in touch and you'll get a form to fill in and you'll get put on our database there.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Great to see you all. Thanks for coming along to these sessions. Hope they've been useful for you. And yeah, hopefully maybe see you on the water rather than a computer screen at some point.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Yeah, see you soon.
Thank you,
Bye.
Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There we go.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Perfect. Can I just ask quickly, did that go all right in Google Meet?
Yeah, it went fine.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing is you can't see people, but
Yeah, I mean, that is a bit disappointing, but yeah, no,
Well,
that's
other
fine. I'm
than
just gathering feedback on,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, what works best.
but I guess I don't always look at people. It's just a bit friendlier for you if you can see some faces sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's fine.
that's
That's,
the only drawback.
yeah, that's all right. Thank you for that. And I'll let you go get on with your evening.
Cheers, Charlotte.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.